Owen was reviewing files at the precinct, contemplating his life in the background of his thoughts. Rain was lashing against the windows, a rhythmic counterpoint to the monotonous hum of the building. 7 years of marriage had settled Owen into a comfortable routine, a predictable life of juggling his work, home, and stolen moments of affection with Marissa. Marissa, his wife, was the epitome of a supportive cop's spouse, a pillar of strength with a mane of auburn hair and a smile that could disarm even the most hardened criminal. She worked long hours as a legal assistant at a prestigious law firm, her dedication mirroring his own. They'd consciously chosen not to have kids, prioritizing their careers. Owen's thoughts were disturbed by the crackling of the radio and the dispatcher's voice. Unit 23, domestic disturbance call at 14th and Elm. Neighbors reported yelling and possible physical altercation. Owen felt a familiar tug of concern. Domestic calls were always dicey, unpredictable. He grabbed his raincoat and duty belt, the leather worn smooth from years of wear. His partner of 3 years, Robert, joined him on his way to the car. The apartment building reeked of stale takeout and cigarette smoke. Owen and Robert climbed the stairs, both slightly on edge despite the years of experience. They reached the designated door and knocked, a tense silence following. They knocked again, harder this time, announcing their presence as police. The door creaked open, revealing a blonde young woman with tear-streaked cheeks. "Hello? I guess the neighbors called you." "Please come in," she stammered. Owen pushed past her, gun drawn, ready for the worst. The sight that greeted him froze him in his tracks. Marissa, her usually perfectly styled hair a mess, stood across from a stranger, a young man with a bewildered expression. Surprise mixed with relief washed over Owen, but were quickly replaced by a cold dread that settled in his gut like a lead weight. "Marissa, what's going on? What are you doing here?" His voice sounded rougher than usual. Robert simply stood back, quiet, not knowing what to make of the situation. Marissa spun around, her eyes widening in a mixture of fear and defiance. "Owen, what are you doing here?" "The neighbors called about a fight," Owen stated, holstering his gun but keeping his hand hovering near it. His gaze flickered to the young man, who looked equally lost. "Who is this?" The young man, his voice hoarse, spoke before Marissa could. "I'm Jess." "Marissa's," he faltered, his eyes darting between Owen, Robert, and Marissa. Marissa cut him off, her voice tight. "Don't listen to him, Owen. This is a misunderstanding." Owen's gaze narrowed. "Misunderstanding? What's going on here? What are you even doing here? Do you know these people?" "I can explain everything. I'm here." "Let's talk outside," Owen said, his voice low and dangerous. Marissa hesitated, then reluctantly followed him out into the hallway and out onto the street. Robert stayed behind, along with the young man named Jess, and the woman who hadn't identified herself yet. Outside, under the harsh glare of the street lamp, Owen confronted Marissa. "What the hell is going on, Marissa?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "It's complicated, Owen." "Complicated," Owen repeated, his voice rising. "You're here with another man, in this apartment, clearly fighting about something." "It shouldn't be complicated. What are you doing here? And who is he?" Marissa took a shaky breath. "Jess and I. We've been seeing each other for a while, Owen." The words hung heavy in the air, each syllable a tiny shard of glass piercing Owen's heart. "How long exactly is this while?" 2 years, Marissa replied, her voice barely audible in the rain. How could he have been so oblivious? They'd gone through a rough patch a couple of years ago, a stressful period fueled by demanding cases and long hours. He'd attributed her distance to work fatigue, never suspecting it masked a deeper betrayal. 2 years? He choked out, the betrayal a bitter pill to swallow. Marissa hung her head. It started as an innocent friendship, but what, Marissa? Owen interrupted, his voice thick with anger. "But you fell in love with him?" "It's not that simple," she mumbled. "Then explain it to me," Owen demanded, his frustration bubbling over. Marissa looked up, her eyes filled with a newfound resolve. I'm pregnant, Owen, and I'm pretty sure that Jess is the father. The news hit Owen like a physical blow. He stumbled back, the rain stinging his face, suddenly cold and unforgiving. Pregnant? He whispered, the word a foreign sound in his ears. Marissa reached out to touch his arm, but Owen recoiled from Marissa's touch, the gesture a painful reminder of the intimacy he now questioned. Pregnant? He repeated, his voice hoarse. Denial flickered in his eyes, a desperate hope that this was some elaborate hoax. Yes, Marissa choked out, tears tracing tracks through her carefully applied makeup. I'm so sorry, Owen. I didn't know how to tell you. Didn't know? Owen barked, his voice tight with rage. Didn't know how to tell me about the pregnancy? Or about the affair you've been carrying on for 2 years? What is it that you didn't know how to tell me? Marissa flinched at his harsh tone. It wasn't planned, Owen. Any of it. It just happened. Jess, a silent observer until now, spoke up, his voice shaky. It's my baby, Owen. Owen whirled on him, fury blazing in his eyes. Who the hell are you? I'm Jess, and I'm in love with Marissa. Marissa's hand flew to Owen's arm, a silent attempt to calm him down. The scene unfolded like a bad dream, each revelation a fresh blow to Owen's gut. The wife he thought he knew, the woman he'd shared his life with, was a stranger. Are you in love with him? Do you want to keep this baby? Owen spat out, the word bitter on his tongue. Well, at least now you have an excuse to walk out. Marissa's shoulders slumped. It's not about excuses, Owen. It's about honesty. I can't stay with you anymore, pretending that everything is okay. Owen stared at her, his gaze tracing the unfamiliar lines etched on her face. Was this regret or relief? Pretending? How long have you been pretending? And how do you even dare speak about honesty when you've been cheating on me for 2 years? Marissa's voice broke. I don't know, Owen. I was confused, but now with this baby. The building door suddenly opened. Owen's partner, Robert, came out, followed by the young woman who opened the apartment door when the police arrived. You two done here? She spat out. Who are you? Owen demanded, his head spinning. The woman crossed her arms, her gaze scathing. My name's Sarah, and apparently I'm the one who gets stuck cleaning up your mess. Sarah turned to Jess, her voice softer now. Honey, come back inside. Jess hesitated, his eyes darting from Sarah to Marissa to Owen. The weight of his indecision hung heavy in the air. Finally, he turned to Marissa, his face etched with pain. I'll call you, he mumbled, following Sarah down the hallway. Owen watched them leave, a hollow ache settling in his chest. The facade of his perfect life had crumbled, leaving him with a broken marriage, a woman he no longer recognized, and a storm of unanswered questions. Owen and Robert took Marissa home and returned to the precinct. The sterile white walls felt suffocating to Owen. He stared at his reflection in the locker mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back. He picked up his phone, his finger hovering over Marissa's contact. He wanted answers, wanted to understand how their life had spiraled so far off course, but the anger simmering within him held him back. Right now, all he could think about was the crushing betrayal. He turned to Robert. Can I stay with you for a couple of days? I can't stomach going home. Whatever you need, man. The next few days were a blur. Owen went through the motions at work, his mind a battlefield of emotions. One evening, as Owen sat nursing a drink at his favorite bar, a familiar voice broke the silence. He looked up to see Sarah, the young blonde from the apartment building, perched on a bar stool next to him. Mind if I join you? She asked, her voice a smoky drawl. Owen hesitated, then nodded. Sure. I'm Jess's older sister, by the way, and your wife's the reason why his life's a tangled mess. Owen felt a flicker of sympathy for the young man. I guess we both got caught in the crossfire, he muttered. Sarah leaned in, her eyes filled with a surprising understanding. You have no idea. They met on one of her business trips, and he actually moved to this city to be with her. He was convinced they were meant for each other. Apparently, she never told him she was married until much later. Owen's jaw clenched. There's a lot she didn't tell either one of us. But that doesn't excuse his part in this, Sarah interjected, her voice firm. He should have ended things with her when he learned about you. Owen took a long swig of his drink, the bitter taste mirroring the betrayal gnawing at him. So, what now? Sarah shrugged. For Jess? Probably a whole lot of heartbreak and therapy. For you? She paused, her gaze holding his. Probably a divorce. The words were blunt, but they held a truth that resonated with Owen. He couldn't change the past, but he could control his present. He spent the next few weeks navigating the legalities of separation. The once joyful apartment became a battlefield, filled with the tense silence of unspoken accusations and the heavy weight of shared memories. One evening, Marissa, her face drawn and weary, sat down across from him at the kitchen table. "We need to talk about the baby," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Owen straightened in his chair, steeling himself for another blow. "What about it?" Marissa's eyes welled up with tears. I don't know what to do. I love you, Owen, or at least I thought I did. But my feelings for Jess, I love him too. And now that I'm with a child." A wave of anger threatened to engulf Owen, but he held it back. "I want you to get a paternity test. It's not like we haven't been intimate," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Marissa flinched. "I thought about it, but what, Marissa?" "I'm scared," she confessed, her voice cracking. "Scared of the results, scared of what it would mean for us, for the baby." Owen stared at her, the woman he'd loved for so long, now a stranger revealed in the harsh light of reality. "We'll figure it out later, but first, we need the truth." The days that followed were filled with tense silence and a suffocating atmosphere. The results of the paternity test arrived in a sterile white envelope, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions brewing within Owen. He ripped it open, his heart pounding against his ribs. Black and white words stared back at him, shattering the last vestiges of hope. The baby was Jess's. A wave of relief washed over him, a strange mix of bitterness and a twisted sense of vindication. He placed the envelope on the table and waited for Marissa to come home. When she arrived, her face etched with worry, he held out the envelope. The results. Marissa took a deep breath before unfolding the piece of paper. She read the contents, her face pale, then looked up at Owen, her eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. "I'm so sorry, Owen," she whispered, her voice thick with regret. "I'm not. At least this way, you'll be out of my life for good." Marissa sat down heavily, tears streaming down her face. The conversation that followed was long and painful. They discussed the division of assets, the future of the apartment, and the legalities of the divorce. There were no accusations, no pleas for forgiveness, just a shared understanding of the irreparable damage inflicted. In the weeks that followed, Marissa moved out of the apartment. Owen never realized that most things in their home were actually Marissa's. Now the apartment felt cold and empty, but it also felt new, like a clean slate, a new life he was about to start living. All he needed to do now was learn to trust women again, find the strength to believe that not everyone was like Marissa, that there was a kind and honest woman out there who would someday make him feel loved and cherished and happy again.